Okay.
The mic's okay.
The mic's okay. Good. Then you want to give us a few counts to start, or shall I just slowly move into it?
I think you can just move into it.
Okay. Good. Yes. Welcome. We're here with Darcy Gray, from a senior teacher from the Ojai School, currently retired. And my name is Jaap Sluijter. I am the executive director of the Krishnamurti Foundation. And we're trying to make a series on education and bringing out somehow some of the things that Krishnamurti talks about in education that are unusual and also and specific to K, but also somehow some concept that I noticed are being translated into ways that I think we could do, maybe not how it was intended to be said. So that's what we're going to discuss. So there are a few terms that Krishnamurti is using. But I would like to start with, so the starting point of this discussion will be, it's a chapter from a book. It's chapter 2 from the book, The Flame of Learning. And we will have broadcasted that episode or that particular recording before we did this recording. So if you want to go back and listen to that particular discussion that Krishnamurti had with teachers at Brockwood Park, believe it's 76. I can give the exact reference also. It's chapter 2 from Flame of Learning, and the recording is Brockwood Park, 11th of September 1976. So I'm first going to ask Darcy to just say a few things about himself, also how he was involved with the Ojai School, and just to place people also how to show the amount of experience and the amount of history you have with the Krishnamurti Foundation and with the Ojai School.
Yes, I started getting familiar with Krishnamurti when I was 23 years old, and I became very interested in what he had to say, especially about the nature of thought. And so I started writing and inquiring into how I could maybe participate. And I think I first wrote to the foundation in Canada, and they sent me to Ojai. And so I think it was in 1978 that I started with the Ojai School. And I participated in all the dialogues here in this room with Krishnamurti, and saw him at lunch, and we had regular dialogues at the school. And so I had a degree in mathematics, and I was inclined to teach mathematics. So eventually I started teaching at the school. And actually, I've taken almost any job you can think of at the school other than being the cook. I've never cooked, but I did cook for the boarding kids. So, yeah, I think that about sums it up.
And which grades did you teach?
Well, I started out with the lower grades because the high school wasn't in running. There weren't students yet. And then as the kids got older, I moved up with them into high school. So I've taught basically all the grades at the school. I team taught with my wife, actually second and third, and I've team taught with Karen Hesley. I taught 5th grade, team taught with her, and I would teach the math and science, and they'd teach the other subjects. So.
Great, and as you already said, many of those discussions that were taking place between the staff and Krishnamurti took place in this room.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's actually a very familiar place for you to discuss about these topics.
And we also had discussions with Dr. Bohm over at Arivahara.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And was that after 78 or was that after 86?
Gosh, I can't say exactly when it was.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Good. So the starting point is the book, The Flame of Learning, chapter 2. And in that book, in chapter 1 already, Krishnamurti starts with various, with the challenge, if I am a new teacher here, what are you, and he asks the staff, what are you, tell me what to do as a new teacher, how are you going to instruct me? And he says, we're going to write a book about this. And at that first chapter, which I discussed with the director of the Indian school in Sayadri, Dr. Shailesh, we discussed chapter 1, which you can also see on the podcast and the previous episode. And one of the things that was discussed in the first chapter was how to establish the right relationship between the teacher and the student, and what it means to not be on the pedestal. I was wondering if you could say a few things about that. What do you think he could have meant, or maybe you know what he meant? But what's your take on it? Yeah.
My experience with it, it's kind of a complex question because I think Krishnamurti meant by that is pedestal in terms of the psychological, like a person is, I'm better, I know more, I'll teach you how it is kind of thing. But there's also, in the academics, there's a fact that you might know more than the student does. So the student comes in and they're looking at me for answers, right? So one of the things that I inquired into is how can the subject be taught just even academically without me being the authority, and talking to the children about that. And like for, say, physics, that's a nice subject in the sense that there's facts that happen and data you can take that's independent of the teacher, and you can help the students to glom onto that. But that's just, I mean, that's part of the habit for them to look at me for answers.
But if you would open that question up, right? So what would be the problem of being on a pedestal? What's the issue that's being addressed here? Why? Okay, everywhere you have a teacher, student. There's clear distance, professional distance between the student and the teacher. Students are supposed to look up. I mean, so. What is the problem that he tries to address by bringing this thing out?
Well, a lot of things come to mind, but to be able to think for oneself, to be able to actually figure out what's going on, makes me think. It was one of the reasons I was attracted to Krishnamurti, because at a young age of, like, in my early 20s, the world seemed so in such distress. I was in distress, and I couldn't really figure out what was going on. And all of a sudden, I'm reading something that says, well, look at your own thought patterns, examine them, follow the logic of what they lead to. And, in the meantime, everybody else is telling you what life is supposed to be like, how to be, what job you should take, and all of that. But look what's happening.
So, would that then mean, would the consequence of a statement like that be, not being on the pedestal, that you become like buddies with them, that you, like, oh, I'm also a student, a kind of very casual relationship, and does it that you have to be friends with them? So is there a threshold where you say, well, because you're a teacher and they're the student,
right?
Yeah. So where does that pedestal end? You know what I mean? Where?
Yeah.
Because I can imagine that you can translate it like that. Okay, I have to be buddy with every student, and.
Yes, it doesn't translate that way, but it's important to have a safe environment, to have affection for the students and all of that. But as far as buddy, it's not that kind of a relationship. It's more a serious relationship where we're trying to actually learn how our own psyche works and the subject matter, which is not a buddy thing. It's just a factual thing.
Yeah, I'm guessing. 'Cause something happens in the relationship or in your own mind, in the mind of a student, when it feels, or it has the impression, or it relates to the teacher as I have to obey, I have to listen, I have to. So there's some kind of element of fear coming in there, right?
Yes.
I'm guessing. Now, even if it's not bluntly, like I'm going to punish you, but a kind of subtle fear of acceptance, fear of being, not being cared for, or fear of not being seen, those kind. So, what? So I'm assuming. So Krishnamurti, I mean, in his work, he was always very clear. He felt that the main purpose of these schools was to make sure that children are free, intelligent and free yes. from their conditioning. And we can go into that a little bit later. But somehow he implies if the relationship is not a relationship where the students start looking for themselves, this kind of learning about freedom is not happening. Why do you feel that is? Why yeah.
Well, I'd like to go back to the fear aspect. Yeah. And mathematics is, in my mind, a good example of how, typically in education, you've got a group of students. And from our society, from where we're brought up, we think of getting the right answer is we identify with it. We're smart, we're dumb, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then in the classroom, you'll see examples of kids laughing when somebody comes up with a wrong answer. And there's all those opportunities to take to get the kids to own up to what's going on. I am afraid. I am concerned about the way other people think. And it's a whole avenue into the psychological. Which, from my memory, what's nice is when it comes up that somebody's actually willing to talk about it, then a lot of the other students realize that same thing's happening with me. But before that, it's all hidden. It's not really exposed.
So you're saying, so there's like you have in the relationship between the students and with the teacher, in the classroom and all the way, there's a kind of dimension that's happening and it's very dominant. But it's unspoken.
It's unspoken.
The whole social dynamic about judging each other, bullying each other in the extreme form, or in minor or lesser degree, or respecting or not respecting.
Exactly. And to mention in my own mind, afraid of how the students might think of me. Maybe I do something unusual or whatever. So to expose that and bring the whole thing out has an effect on its own. And it's also, it's like the common consciousness is brought more to the surface.
Just to tease that a little bit further out, in the book they talk about commonly, in the book they specifically talk about hairstyle, right? They're not supposed to have long hair, and of course you can constantly, which normally happens in relationship. I mean, I'm a parent, I know that all too well. You're constantly trying to correct the child. Oh no, this is not good, that's not good, this is not good. So, and somehow Krishnamurti in that book says, well, there's something wrong with that. There's a problem by setting the relationship up by which you constantly say, this is not allowed, that's not allowed, this is right, or in a subtle way, because this is blunt, of course, but in a subtle way, this is what I expect of you, this is what I expect of you, this, you know what I mean? That in a more subtle way, bringing certain expectations, where the measurement of what is right and wrong is in you and not in the student. So, can you say a few words about that?
Well, what comes to mind when Krishnamurti was speaking in this room, no one showed up late. And no one showed up late.
Yeah, yeah.
It started on time, and that was the expectation. And it was just clear that that's what was going to happen. So, I mean, that was my take on it. When I started my classes, we started on time.
Yeah.
I didn't really have that much difficulty with people not coming on time. Right?
Yeah. But
I think they saw the importance of it.
Yes, but I understand that. But I just want to. He somehow says, well, if you as a teacher, if your focus is on what is correct behavior and what's incorrect behavior, and it's constantly correcting them, you establish a kind of relationship where that will be the focus, right? The focus
Yes.
will in correction. Well, he said, well, can you shift the focus? I mean, that in that text he does that wonderful. Can you shift the focus not to that particular thing itself, the particular being late or doing certain other things that are not desired, but can you shift the focus to that we are attached to, or that we have certain habits that we would like that we execute or that we fulfill, and that there's a habit-creating machine behind that. And he said, if you just condemn or if you correct, that aspect doesn't come out. And he said, well, I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, it makes sense. And the suggestion, what comes to mind is attentiveness, watchfulness, and watching what's going on, the habit-forming process, and encouraging in the classroom that attentiveness to what's happening, not just the academic, but the relationships and all that's going on, how we clean up whatever we do, being attentive to that. And having read that section, I'm really taken by how Krishnamurti talks about habit and how our brain is basically a habit-forming mechanism. And how do we address that, or what aspect of us is different than that habit-forming mechanism?
Is there a difference? Is there a different aspect, or is all of what we are just, because that actually is a very like we like certain things. That's because of our particular conditioning, our personal conditioning, or much further. That's a certain, the certain hormones are produced, the whole dopamine rush, the dopamine mechanism. I like it. I feel, if I get it, I feel good. And that's more or less how we guide our lives, right?
Right.
What we like and what we don't like, or what we believe, which we could discuss it further, but I would assume that belief has the same aspect. I have some kind of dopamine release by believing in something and holding on to something, kind of safety.
Right.
And all that. So, but how do you address that with kids? How do you get that central in a class? I'm not expecting you to answer, but can you just, from your how did you wrestle with this question in the class? What I don't, because, and maybe that's important to start. This is something we don't know how to do, right? As school or as teachers or as we're wrestling with it and we're trying to come up on it.
Yeah.
And maybe there are moments where it happens and moments not happen. But I think it will be very useful to bring out how have you wrestled with this, and how did you look, where did you succeed and where did you fail? You know what I mean?
I don't know if this is going to be the answer you're looking for, but we're wrestling with it right now.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of watching, of listening, that as far as my logical mind can discern, is not part of the habit of whatever thoughts I might be having, or even the concept of me being a separate person than you. And the question is, what is that aspect of watching, of awareness? And what relationship does that have with the brain, if we think of the brain as this habit-making mechanism? And this is, of course, just a memory, but what I got from Krishnamurti, often more than the words, is the attentiveness. When you walked in the room, he was looking at you and everyone, very attentive to everything that's going on. Similar to a young child, the way they look around all the time, they're just sensing everything that's going on. And to talk with the kids about that, that's something different that teachers typically don't talk about and don't find value in, as far as my education.
Were you able to do that only with older kids or with younger kids also? Does it start early? I mean,
Well, I would say with the younger kids, it's more of a, is it not, a nonverbal thing. And also, I mean, they're and going back to the authority, that just talking to them about, look at the rest of the room. I'm not the one with the answers, right? Bringing it forward through a thought. But the actuality of, once they start to look at each other and discuss together, that's a whole different ballgame than them looking at me or some authority. So,
did you feel frustrated sometimes by doing it and feeling you were not able to do it, or you should do it better? Does it come with its own set of frustrations and I don't know, I'm just wondering how.
I mean, I'm sure all of that is a fact of working with kids and all of that, right? I mean, it's a constant movement, though. It's just, I mean, one can think back and when one was frustrated or whatever. The thing is that, for lack of a better way of saying it, the truth of it, once one sees the value in this, quote unquote, watching, being aware of something, one wouldn't just go back to the routine again. It's something that grows on you, so to speak, or widens out.
And how did you, how was it to bring that about with a group of people, with a group of teachers? Because I can imagine, I mean, all the schools that I've been in, and I've been teaching myself also, like curriculum planning, admin, parents. I mean, there's so many different things that put pressure on you to do. Well, you have to get, you're only on level 2, you need to be on level 4, otherwise you don't make the calendar. So,
right.
So how do you, so how was it to bring it back to this, what we just talked about, having this focus, and how did you find the balance, and were you able to do that with other teachers?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question directly, but in examining one's thought and working with other people, it becomes obvious after a time how often the conflicts that you're experiencing and you put onto other people are actually due to the way your thought process is working. And the whole concept of me and what you're doing to me comes into play. And then to get glimpses of that is rather eye-opening. That the reason I'm upset with these people is because there's something, I want them to look at me a certain way. I want to be something. I want something to happen. Just a different viewpoint of social interaction and interaction between other people. So it comes back to the person involved, right? Not so much the other folks.
And I'm guessing that's also where that whole word pedestal comes in again. You know what I mean? Because you're in that, and the students are in that too. They have their frustrations, they have their anger, they have their irritations. So somehow, on that level, on the psychological level, you're in the same boat.
Yes.
And so how and that of course must be a real challenge to, because that's easy to pretend, right? Pretend as you're an adult who knows. You know how to resolve conflict. You know how to deal with fear or something, which is
how it should be.
The fact, of course, it's not true. you know. No, but I mean, but there's somehow a kind of pressure from ourselves first and foremost, and then also assimilated from others, to be able to be that authority who knows how to navigate fear. Oh, you're afraid, or how to navigate conflict. Oh, you can solve it this way, and I'm guessing that's really where the pedestal comes in, right?
Yes.
To be somehow, I guess, a kind of vulnerable and a willingness to go there without,
Yes, I mean, I can't but agree with what you're saying, that we're all in the same boat, basically.
Yeah.
But to bring it out and examine it has an effect on its own, so to speak.
Yeah.
With all involved.
Yeah.
I mean, once the kids realize what's going on, in terms of, say, fear in the math, and we're able to look at that without any condemnation or whatever, there's an effect on its own.
There was one thing that you mentioned this week when we spoke before, that you were unclear, or that you were thinking, is there a need, if you say, hey, the schools are really there, the educational places are really there to help students to be free, support them into being free. And is there a factor of, well, that only the students who are ready are able to be there? So could you say a few things about that? Is there something like that? Is there a democracy here in freedom? It's there equally for everyone to take, or, well, you need to have a few steps on the spiritual ladder before you can undertake this. I would just wonder how you.
Well, it's a question for me. I don't know if it's a relevant question or not, but some people look at Krishnamurti's work and they don't understand it, or they just reject it, or they look at it as just another religion, even though he's talking about something that's not the traditional religion. And it's a curious thing why some people take it up and others don't. But I can't answer the question. It's just, I wonder about it.
But I would say then, well, how would you measure?
How would you measure?
Because I can, of course, what I can measure is actionable behavior.
Right.
Now, that can be easily learned. Somebody who picks up from you, Darcy wants me to look like I'm aware. Darcy wants me to ask a certain question, so I have that behavior. I'm going to adapt to that behavior. Or somebody who doesn't have that, but somewhere internally does start looking and have these questions. I'm just wondering, is it possible to measure, or is it somehow something you just do it because it's the right thing, and I'm not going to care about if it has measurable success or not,
Well, I agree with the last thing you're saying, but I mean, if someone's keen on something, I mean, we're talking about this together.
Yeah.
I can feel that you're keen on this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not rocket science. It's just we're interested in discussing this. Other folks, I've run into them that don't want to talk about it. They've told me, I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
Not interested.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an evaluation thing, good or bad or not. They're just not interested.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that you can't. It doesn't mean that you don't affect them somehow by having this atmosphere of questioning. And I know in my own educational background that we had students.
Yes.
And I thought they were just the most messy, chaotic, rebellious, and you think nothing had come true. And I see them, I recently, a few years back, I saw some walking down the street here, and they came to me, that moment, this and that, you gave us these books, you did this. I said, that has changed my life. I said, and at that moment, I had no idea that any of this had come true.
Yes.
I'm just saying, how would we know? Is it not important that we just do the right thing? Meaning, bringing about these environments, even if, the superficial part of someone will reject it, because of all kinds of inner, they're being pushed all their life to do certain things, and at a certain point they don't want to rebel against all that, right?
Yeah.
But that rebellion is not as a measure of not having that sensitivity to this. I don't know if that makes
It makes perfect sense. My thought process goes to, back to the classroom where the children are afraid, and then they realize it's a common thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to get glimpses of it, but it appears as though our consciousness is common to all of us.
Yeah.
So that if there's any fluctuation in any particular part of it, it may have an effect on the whole of it. So, and you were speaking the other day possibly about the speaking to the unconscious, right? And the effect
something
of
I'm going to get to. Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. No, it's good. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Dreams and the whole thing, and how we all have an effect on each other and on ourselves in different ways. So.
Yeah, I was saying that because I think what we try to bring out is there something like insight, right? Is there if we say there is insight, meaning some kind of seeing of something that is beyond your personal preference. It's just that's what it is. The puzzle fits together this way and not a different way. Or, I'm afraid because of this or that. That you have some kind of insight or an understanding of why something happens. And if that's impersonal, it can happen at any moment, at any time, at any, there's no preconditions for it. Or is there? Is there a precondition? Maybe that we have to bring that out. Is there a precondition for insight into things? That might be an interesting... And then in the personal field, not in the mathematics. Mathematics, you probably have to work your way through things. But but more in the psychological field. Is there preconditions for insight into who you are?
Yeah. So insight in general, that's a question, right? And there... Krishnamurti alluded to the fact that insight could possibly be related to this watching, to being aware, to looking. Yeah. And then anything beyond that, though, is just a speculation. It's the kind of the place where the known is on the edge of the unknown, and you can't go any further with that. Yeah. So. Yeah. And I think often one thinks of insight as something kind of, the concept of it's mind-shattering or something, but maybe it's just a simple thing. Of that, being aware. Of ourselves as we move through life, awareness of it.
And I think maybe now I'm getting clear. While you're talking, I got clear on why I was asking that question, because I sometimes feel maybe we put too much emphasis on the particular momentary beliefs that are in place, like you believe this or you believe that, or you're rebelling against this, or you, and thinking that somehow that's the self. We treat it as something permanent in the person, and by that also we fix it. Well, maybe if you talk to a component that's not part of that inside, it's not limited by that, right? So in a way, somehow, that's why linked to that whole, can you talk to the unconscious? If you talk to the conscious, you meet all this superficial belief, understanding, rebelliousness, this and that.
Conflicting.
But can you somehow reach beyond that? Yeah. Meaning, talking to, what is the fact of the matter? You believe this, and it's not about changing someone's mind, and I think that's really important. It's not about, okay, you believe this, can you challenge it and can you change it? No, it's just, can you understand how belief comes into you? You know what I mean? And what belief does to you.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is a completely different angle and a different focus in all this. Yeah. Which is a little bit related to what you mentioned before, or what we talked about before. It's like, okay, there is an in a classroom or in any community, but we're focused on education at the moment, classrooms. There's an unspoken aspect of a classroom that you very difficult to touch, right? Because all the interpersonal stuff, all the individuals who have their insecurities and who cannot talk about it, or they have their belief systems, etc. So at the same time, there's another aspect. So that's present, but often not being discussed, and that's something we want to bring out. At least put awareness to. Doesn't have to be confessional, but
right.
Awareness to. But then there's another component, is to become aware or to point towards the fact that each of our minds is constantly creating like a world of illusion. It's like this. You do this, he does this, and suddenly I believe this and this is happening. Because my mind is a prediction machine and constantly wants to see if there are patterns in things. And so it creates the simulated world, or the Maya, the world of illusion, in order to make sense of what's happening.
Yeah.
So and I think somewhere you said also that that's maybe also an important aspect to point at or to look at with kids. And can you say something about that?
Yeah. Well, what came to mind right away is that, like when you and I get together, it's kind of promoted the illusion. It's not just independent. I'm creating it all by myself. Yeah. It's an interplay. In terms of reward and punishment and all of it, and then projecting out on another person that they've done something to you, and they're going to be upset, and then they are upset with you, and they think you've done something. And so it's a
kind of self-fulfilling prophecy happens there too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily easy to observe. Yeah. Because the mind is caught up in it.
Yeah.
And then the question is, what can see that?
Yeah.
How could it see itself in that process? And it's kind of hard to imagine that the thought process could see itself in that process. Some other dimension has to be involved in that. Not sure exactly what that is, but it seems related to awareness.
Could you try to say more about that other dimension, or I know the other dimension might not be the word, but there might be something interesting to unpack.
Well, again, I'm working from my memory, but it came. We had a staff meeting, your staff, and it came to mind being sensitive to something, listening, watching, and then you made the comment, the unknown. It's something, can't really, can't touch it, can't talk about it. There's not a lot to say.
That's not very helpful.
I mean, we can see what it's not, right? That's the helpful part. Possibly. Maybe not.
When you look back over from 78, what is that? 22, 40, 45 years, in education, 44 years almost, right? 43, 40 years. Almost the whole history of the school You were there, right? I mean, school started
Yeah,
in
off and
74.
on. I did have some breaks.
Yeah,
and-
yeah. But more or less that was the focus of where you were at. I mean, do you feel it's worthwhile?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what exactly happened in my life where something happened where things weren't going well with me. But I'm very appreciative of the fact that something else happened, because the only way I can look at it is through comparison.
Yeah.
I look back and at my siblings or people I've known, and I don't fit in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
not meaning I'm on a pedestal or anything, but I'm just
Yeah.
appreciative of the fact.
Yeah.
And a thought came to mind. I mean, in the early days, of listening to Krishnamurti, there were some moments that affected me deeply that I can't really put a finger on. It was kind of like somehow he or what he was talking about was affecting my unconsciousness, right? I remember one talk he gave at the Nordhoff High School, and I came out in the parking lot, and I just burst into tears. I didn't know why, right? But I did for some reason. So
Something got resolved or something.
I absolutely do not know.
Yeah,
I just know there was some effect on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Right. And as I said earlier, it's not something that one necessarily can let go or hold on to or whatever, but just stays with you once you start to investigate, look into this. I mean.
Yeah. Do you feel, like, of course, there's only one Krishnamurti school in America and one Krishnamurti school in England, and then several in India. So as far as a concept, or a franchise, it hasn't really spread, and maybe that was also not needed. But do you feel that the kind of things that Krishnamurti was talking about, and that you guys have been wrestling with at the Ojai School over the years, trying to bring this about, do you feel that has spread somehow? The essence is spreading, or the essence, that kind of questioning, or the kind of do you feel that these kind of efforts have become more common, or are over the last 40 years, or are we still at the same place like 40 years ago?
Well,
and I don't mean with public school or something, because that's very difficult. But there are many small school initiatives, of course.
No, I guess I think on a broader range, and I started back in '78, and I don't think this was much of a common concept back then. But I did notice over the years, just in psychology, people started talking about awareness and how it has an effect on helping people. Just that alone. Where did that come from? How did that all of a sudden get into the culture?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if a lot of people have talked about it other than Krishnamurti, but I know he had an influence on a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And a lot of psychologists came to see him and all of that.
So that's on psychology. Do you feel something like that has happened also in education?
There's some aspects of education where there's more focus on less authority and more helping the students to build their own constructs as far as the way things work and the value in that. But I'm not aware of exactly the whole thing of what he's talking about is happening in a lot of places. I know some places it does happen, and they have it in colleges and things like that.
But would you say, okay, this is a big one then, would you say that if you have if there's a teacher, a person in your life, a teacher in the classroom, anywhere, not at Oak Grove, but anywhere,
Right.
that somehow has this interest, that interest, that focus will transpire somehow. You know what I mean? Even in any school situation, that if this is your life and this is your interest, it will come out one way or another.
I can just say that in my daily life, I think it does, yeah. In my interactions with other people and that kind of thing.
And I'm especially asking it also because I'm hoping that maybe some educators will be watching this. And I was thinking, what can they do? You know, what is there? Is it really okay? You know, there's just one place where that is happening, or, you know, maybe not. Maybe it's actually important that people in various places start.
Well,
that the focus is very
right.
Yeah.
Well, this whole idea of cooperation, not around an idea, and being able to work with people, and understanding how if you're cooperating over a particular idea or belief and all the problems that are involved with that applies directly to the classroom. And, you know, there is a movement to have people work in groups a lot more, work together, and it's invaluable to have the kids being aware of what's going to cause problems in their interactions and all of that. So I think there's intrinsic value in that. That goes way beyond the classroom, of course, but...
I'm guessing, you know, if you look at the book, The Flame of Learning, in that chapter, he says literally, you want the student to be supremely intelligent, you know. And I when I was reading it, I said, so what is now? Of course, if you read most curriculums or most mission statements of schools, this is often not the mission statement, right? That you'll see. Of course, they say, you know, I mean, most progressive schools have really very interesting mission statements now. It's about educating the whole child and etc. But in specifically how Krishnamurti is formulating this, what is required in what's happening in the relationship between the teacher and the student, and how to bring about that kind of sense of freedom, not freedom to do what you like, but freedom in the sense of the ability to see who you are, and to be aware of who you are, and to learn from that. I think that is not the mission statement of public schools or most general schools. No. I hope there are other schools, and there might be, because I know there's, you know, America is the good thing about America is there's so many different initiatives.
Well, it comes down to, doesn't it, that this whole word intelligence. I mean, typically it means academics, being able to succeed, being exacting in your work, not the whole of relationship and understanding how your brain works and all of that. So it can be in a mission statement, but it has a totally different meaning than what Krishnamurti is referring to.
But I mean, of course, you know, if you just write it into a leaflet, a school leaflet, that might. No, but at least, you know, but somehow you have to have it in your mission in order for people to say, hey, that's the most important thing that we need to do here.
Right.
In order, you know, no, but it's not in our mission. No, but it's in the mission. You know, at the moment, well, you do that in your free time. What we do here is serious. We do academics. You know, I mean, the core curriculum or whatever. You know?
But wouldn't you agree that the common meaning of intelligence doesn't encompass a lot of what we're talking about?
No. I mean, intelligence in generally is being used for somehow being able to recognize patterns, right? And the ability to recognize patterns, and that's also the intelligence test is. All about can you see the patterns the quickest, right?
Which has a certain, it's like a muscle, it's a tool, it's not important, but
of course, you know, and that's quite interesting. Is there a relationship between that intelligence and the intelligence that Krishnamurti is talking about, or the intelligence that we're talking about here? Is it completely uncoupled, or is there some kind of connection between that? Do you need to be able to see patterns? or is that only in the field of the known, in knowledge and?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I don't know how big the connection is for sure, but the logic that you need to follow a statistical sorry, pattern, right? You need that logic to understand how your mind is working.
Yeah, yeah.
To a certain extent.
Do you? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to think it out.
Yeah. Do you? Yeah. I'm just trying.
Well, like here, I'm talking, right? I just stuttered and say I'm concerned about how I'm going to come across. Right? I stuttered, and there's that thought, and then there's the fact that I'm talking right now, and I'm talking about it, and some separation between me talking and the talking going on. Now, is it logical that there's actually two different things going on? Or is it just one thing going on? Mm-hmm. It's a question. Mm-hmm. And a question that can be explored and followed. Mm-hmm. And then you could think of it in terms of time, right? Mm-hmm. You could say, well, if the time frame gets smaller and smaller, is there actually more than one thing going on? Meaning me thinking, the thinker, and then this thought. And then it becomes a question. Right? Through logic, it doesn't seem that could be possible. Only one thing can happen in any nanosecond, to put it to an extreme. I mean, you could take that and then you start, be curious about it, look into it, right?
Yeah.
But the actual fact of looking into it seems a little different than the logic behind it, right? You might not be inclined to look at the logic.
Yeah. So okay. So it's an interesting field, and I'm just. Of course, I don't want to be too speculative, but some thoughts I have. I'm just going to put it out there, and then you can just. Of course, this goes very much to what Krishnamurti talks about. He asks. Can you drop something? Can you drop the habit? And then you would say normally, well, I will try. And no time, right?
Right.
So as if there's some kind of action that doesn't require you to have an understanding of the problem, define a strategy, and then execute the strategy. So that he's saying that there's an immediate action possible. Now, you can wrestle with that kind of thing ongoing, because you can say, well, I have a habit. I first have to understand the habit. What is the habit? And I can analyze it. I can look at it.
And why is a habit bad?
That's it. No, but suppose you have identified there's a habit and it's bad.
You think it's bad.
No, but I want to go somewhere else. So okay. Let's accept that for the moment. Now, because the starting point was, what is intelligence, right? And intelligence is, we have somehow established, the normal way of using the word intelligence is pattern recognition. Information and seeing the patterns in information.
Yeah.
So you could superimpose that on life's problems. You could say, hey, if I see myself being afraid in relationship, then I see there's a pattern, right? Mm-hmm. So now, is that the kind of intelligence that we're looking for? Or is the intelligence here, where Krishnamurti is pointing at, has nothing to do with pattern recognition? It's just being aware of the fact in the moment that the mind is, the brain is producing thought. Nothing more to that. Because that's in the moment, and that's only what it is. The other thing would be pattern recognition. I'm thinking it because of this. It's part of myself. This is what I am. This is what I not am. Or is it just only the first bit, seeing my thought is producing, my thinking is producing thought, and that's the source of all of it.
So can I agree with you and disagree with you at the same time? I mean, well, one could go along and be doing this thing of pattern recognition and not recognize that there's any difficulty with it.
Mm-hmm.
In the practical world, it seems like it works fine.
Of course, yeah.
And it's working fine that way. And
Yeah.
in the moment, it might seem like everything's fine.
Yeah.
But somehow, if you look at a wider picture, it's not going fine.
Mm.
Or at various times, it doesn't go fine.
Mm.
So there's something in that pattern making that might trigger one to look to something else.
Mm.
Or maybe not. Maybe that something else just would have an effect on a person if they weren't, say, conditioned the way we are conditioned.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the difficulty, is that we've grown up to take on the conditioning of the culture.
Mm. Mm.
So in that sense, there has to be some kind of acknowledgement of what that's doing in order to strike a light somewhere else, possibly, so to speak. I don't know. But would you not agree with that deep conditioning?
Yeah, but in that sense, you could say, well, okay, freedom from it might not be the absence of it, but might be seeing how it comes into being, that thought produces it, and then the negation of it.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? Because
Yeah.
so that it doesn't have to be looked at thought by thought. You know what I mean? Element of conditioning by element. You know, you don't have to inspect it all.
No. I think what you're getting at is that the watchfulness is not a thing of continuity. The awareness is not a thing of continuity.
Yeah. No, I'm more saying.
No?
No. What I was more saying is, you are conditioned. I am conditioned. We're talking about what does it mean to be free from conditioning.
Yes.
Now, one thing is, do you really have to see how you've been brought up? The little Darcy brought up, this and that, had his likes and dislikes been built up, and with all of that, that's the Darcy now.
Right.
Or is there a full negation of the whole conditioning possible? Meaning not that it's not there anymore, but it's seen for what it is, and therefore there's freedom. You know what I mean? Because otherwise it will take time. Oh, Darcy has certain repeating thoughts, and it always comes up, and that's Darcy. And now, he goes to therapy, solves that,
right.
And then the next problem comes, and then Darcy solves that problem. You know what I mean?
There's a thought in my mind that says we possibly might be saying the same thing, just saying it differently.
Okay, yeah, good. Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying.
Okay, good.
Yeah. You're not going to wake up one day and there's no thought.
Yeah. So, a few more things, but we have only a few more minutes left. I think 5 more minutes. I think that's. I had some. This is the one. And that's about. I mean, first, when Krishnamurti talks about school, he says schools are a place of leisure. He mentioned that in many other talks also, but in this particular discussion with teachers at Brockwood, he also mentions that again. Did you come across that? Schools as a place of leisure?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So how maybe you could say something about it.
Well, the first thing is, it's like the word intelligence. The leisure he's talking about is not the same as the way we normally think of it. A day at the beach or something. So he's talking. Well, maybe the word means there's the space. There's the what would you say, the groundwork, the soil for something to grow and flower and happen. That space is available. I mean, you still can go to work and do
Yeah.
all that you need to do, and you know, have that culture or that space available.
Yeah. Sometimes he says leisure is defines it that leisure is infinite space to observe. Have you come across that?
I might have, I don't know, but that makes sense to me, right?
Yeah, leisure is so somehow that something is happening in a school or in a classroom or with the students and with the teachers, obviously, that there's space to observe, as if it's possible to not have space to observe, right? Crowdedness but so schools place. I don't know what as if you say school is a place of leisure is infinite space to observe, then somehow you can organize a school that there's no space to observe it. And I'm guessing then he goes to constantly correcting. This is right, this is wrong, this is what you should do, this is what you not. You know what I mean? Then there's no space to observe, there's just space to obey, follow, and rebel, which is just the opposite of that. So infinite space to observe means somehow that the looking is central, I guess.
Yeah. And there's room for things to flower, to develop, right?
Yeah.
In that space.
Yeah.
So they can be seen.
Yeah. Yeah. So then he, in the last sentence, or one of the last sentences of that talk is, I come here for that purpose. I could go to any school, but I come here only for that reason, because I've heard that there are a group of people here who are concerned with this and trying to learn about it. I thought that was a beautiful sentence.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because somehow I feel that's what we're doing here also.
Yeah.
It's not like a separate.
No. Yeah, I agree. And with the dialogues that you have here and your programs and all of that, it's opportunity. Yeah.
Anything else that comes up that you say, hey, that's what interesting, I would like to mention that, or that comes up to the discussion?
I can't think of anything, but I've enjoyed talking with you and sitting here, so thank you.
Me too, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Darcy. Good.
I caught you laughing at me, yeah.